Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think they served alcohol at lunch. And I'm glad they didn't, because this topic, this session, is stone sober. For the last 20 years, we have heard endless talk about mega projects in Central Asia, in the Caucasus, and especially in the Caspian region. Huge projects with immense price tags and immense potential. And the question now is, to what extent are all these projects blah, 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 so much nice talk, and to what extent are they serious, feasible, and even likely projects on which the success of which we should be planning in the future? This is a very real topic. It's not abstract, and we have real specialists to address it. And after their presentations, we're going to ask you for your views. To what extent are these mega projects real? And to what extent are we living in fantasy? So we're going to begin with our friend Matthew Bryza, former ambassador. He is going to start with the Caspian world, which he has followed very closely.
Thank you, Dr. Starr. I hope you guys aren't totally tired of hearing my voice. I promise you this is the last time. I got my introduction to this world through the U.S. pursuit of two of those mega projects. One succeeded, one failed. The one that succeeded is the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil pipeline from Azerbaijan's offshore fields in the Caspian Sea, as the name would imply, to Tbilisi, and to Ceyhan, Turkey, and international markets from that port. And of course, the U.S. had pursued, was supporting other pipelines as well, two that, by the way, transited Russia. So the goal wasn't to push Russia out of the game, but it was to provide optionality to the companies and the countries so that they couldn't be squeezed by Russia, whether it be on price or geopolitics. And the reason that succeeded was because the countries involved, the routes, were all aligned at the very highest level. Their national leaders wanted to do Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan. Number two, the geology cooperated. There was a lot of oil in Azerbaijan that needed to find a market. And number three, you had strong support from the U.S. Saying that huge new supply of oil, it makes no sense for it to reach global markets either via current monopolized transit routes through Russia or through geographic choke points like the Turkish Straits or the Strait of Hormuz, where there are actual operational and geostrategic vulnerabilities to the flow of oil. But most importantly, we in the US government pushing this knew the project made sense. We knew it made commercial sense. We spent a lot of time talking to the oil companies, private ones and international ones, and so we knew it would be a good investment that the government supporting the project wouldn't have to pay for. So it happened. The one that didn't happen is the Transcaspian natural gas pipeline. It didn't happen, number one, because the companies and countries on the western side of the Caspian, namely Azerbaijan and BP, discovered a lot of gas at this time in the Shah Deniz field. That's been a hugely successful investment and project. But at that time, those guys on the western side of the Caspian, they didn't want more gas coming through their export route. Now they want it. Azerbaijan wants to be a transit state. But the third factor is continuing to block a Transcaspian pipeline, which is intimidation by Moscow. I mentioned it yesterday in my remarks. I'm going to repeat what I said. The former leader of Turkmenistan, Saparmurat Niyazov, one time said to my boss and me, the Russians tell me if we continue to export all of our gas north through Russia, Turkmenistan will be stable and I will be a safe and wealthy man. But if you send that gas west, none of those three things will be true. So that specter of Russia's threats and opposition is still plaguing the Turkmenistani government. And my very last comment, I was approached by a very sophisticated investor a month ago saying, I hear things are changing in Turkmenistan. Let's do a Transcaspian pipeline project. Super sophisticated investor. And I had to tell him, there is absolutely no political appetite for that right now in Turkmenistan because of the inner struggles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, the new port in Azerbaijan is one of the real changes. And it was initially developed by a former fellow of ours, and we are fortunate to have its chief operating officer, Eugene Seah, here today to report on it. Is it real?
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation here. Can you put up the presentation? Well, there's just a backdrop. The interesting question here is the word fantasy. Well, my question is, was it a reality before? If you go back in time to 1206, when the Mongols conquered the whole space of Central Asia, even up to Russia, parts of Europe, to parts of Turkey, it was then a reality. It was more than a transport corridor. It was an economic corridor, in fact. From east to west, west to east, goods were traded along these routes using horse, camels, 1,000 of them, where they were traded fur, horses, gold, silk, jade from China. But coming back now, where do we see us now? It was right. For many years, in fact, for the past 25 years, there were a lot of big infrastructure projects. Started in 2011, you had the Korgos, the border crossings was created. Then you need to bring the cargo across to Aktau. So Kazakh government created the Trans-Kazakh Railway. They created about 988 kilometers of new tracks between Kazakhstan and Aktau. And that forms a direct link. Then you got across the Caspian Sea, and the Azerbaijan government initiated the border crossing at Arka-Haraki, so that solved the problem of the border crossings onwards to Turkey. But did we see cargoes flowing from east to west and west to east? 9 years ago, I came to Azerbaijan to manage the port. At that time, the number of containers that the port handled was 5,000 TEUs, 5 to 10,000 TEUs. When I'm in Singapore, I handled that in 1 hour in the port. But this is a whole year's throughput. So why was it not possible? Because we keep seeing the route as a transport corridor. If you see the route as a transport corridor, it is very elastic. Anything that happens in the geopolitical space around you that causes a disruption will disrupt this notion of a transport corridor. Let me explain. When Turkey had problems with Russia and Turkey shot down a Russian jet and all the trucks were forbidden from going through Russia to Central Asia, guess where they came? They came through the middle corridor and Port of Baku. And we were in flux. We were holding so many trucks because this transport corridor at that time was served as an alternative route for them. Coming back to the current situation, when the Ukraine war started in 2022 in February 20, the same thing happened. Not only trucks, we found an influx of cargo of containers coming through. And those three big infrastructure projects that I was talking about, did it manage to handle the kind of capacity that overnight we were swamped with? No. Containers were building up in the port, staying there for 3, 4, 5, even 6 months. What was the problem? We had 3 big critical projects. We had all the rail tracks in place. It should go. The real problem came from the expectation of what these infrastructure projects mean. to the country, to the developers, to the stakeholders who build it. If you talk about capacity on the Northern Corridor, before the war, it was 1.4 million TEUs. Why is it possible? Three things. There was a joint operating company that operates it, China Express, UTLC, Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, they were in the Eurasian Economic Union. So harmonization of standards, tariffs, rates were possible. That's create the institution framework for operational efficiency. If you're coming back to the Central Asia, after the Soviet broke up, all the railways were broke up. You have the Kazakh railway, you have the EDY railway, you have Georgian, you have the China's on that side, the railways. All these railways, when they come together, they have different ways of transmitting information between the countries, between the borders. You have SMGS document, you have OTIF document, you have CIM document. My goodness. So, how does the system handle this? You have to transfer by hand. And if you transfer by hand, you make mistakes and everything slows down. Worse still, if you have a rush of influx of containers as what we experienced during the war, the first few months after the war. It was just not possible to handle because the infrastructure alone did not cater to the capacity. Infrastructure means a few things. It's not only the rails that you build, it's the type of rails that you build, whether it's electrified or not electrified. It's not only border crossings you build, it's how you build it. Whether there's a consolidated shunting yard capacity to manage the wagons, and whether there's a system to manage it. It's not good enough that your wagons leave the port and goes to the other side. You need to know where it is. There must be a system to track it. You need to have a common tariff and not let a trader go to different railways to ask what's going on, can I have a tariff? So these issues were not there, and that means that there was no efficient flow of cargo moving from west to east or east to west. But the question is, does it still remain a fantasy? No, because after the war started, it started to change the behaviors from the top, from the leaders of Central Asia, from C5. In 14 September, all the C5 leaders met in Dushanbe and they had a meeting. They even invited President Ilham to the meeting. They realized they need to have a union of sorts, to talk, to have dialogues more open, to create some sort of economic cooperation at a formal level. But it's difficult to translate this to a formal union, looking at the political climate that C5 is in, with Russia and China at its sides. Azerbaijan was invited to this, President, because they recognize Azerbaijan as a key node in the transit corridors. You can't go up to Russia, there's Northern. You can't go down south, there's the sanctions. Where else you go? You have to go through us, Azerbaijan. 5 days later, in New York, President Biden invited to have the C5 meetings also with Central Asian countries. But it was then without Azerbaijan. I think collectively, going forward, we need to look at this at a holistic level, aggregate it, and see what's the end in mind.
Okay,
Yeah,
time.
yeah, done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're now going to turn to Mamuka Murjikneli, who is not just the CEO, but the Chief Operating Officer, the General Manager of Wondernet Express Investment Group in Georgia.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here to speak with such a distinguished audience. You mentioned in the beginning, actually, when we gathered there together, that if there are real projects happening, and if there is a financing, if there is a will, or what's happening there, or if it's just blah, blah, blah. So I can tell you that I will focus on one particular thing, which my company is involved. It's a dry bulk transshipment from Central Asia to rest of the world, and we are a big part of Middle Corridor, and we are big supporters of Middle Corridor. Companies that I represent, together with our American partners, we made a direct investment into Batumi port to build a very modern terminal for fertilizers, and the first time we saw that fertilizers, let's say, which are made in Uzbekistan, they started to come through Middle Corridor. And this was just before the war. So I'm saying that, this Middle Corridor works very well, and it's an obvious route for many products that are produced in mainly in Central Asia. And I'm always saying this, that Central Asia is increasing and developing very very fast. And we see many new projects happening here. We see many new factories that are opening up. We started together with our friends in Aliat Port this project to bring Turkmen urea through Caspian Sea, and then all the way using then Azerbaijan-Georgia railroad, and to bring this urea to Georgia. That was the first time when Turkmenistan started to sell their product on a Black Sea, and they started to use the bigger players there, as their customers, like big companies that are using fertilizers. We also saw the big companies who are involved in the oil and gas sector in Kazakhstan, that they started to move their products through Middle Corridor, which was never a case before. So definitely, what we need right now in Middle Corridor, we need more projects, we need more infrastructure. In regard of what my company needs, we need new warehouses to be built in Georgia on a Black Sea. Definitely, we will be working together with our friends in Aliat Port to invest more into warehouses in Aliat Port as well. Because there is at least what we are looking at, we are losing at least 5 million tons of fertilizers that are not coming to Middle Corridor today. And that's because of the lack of infrastructure. And this infrastructure includes as well the rehabilitation of railroads as well in Georgia, in Azerbaijan, to add more wagons there, to add more new infrastructures there. And in regard of Middle Corridor, we need to work together. And there is a good example actually how we and Aliat Port work together, and we work almost every day together to bring these goods, to bring these fertilizers through our corridor, and we definitely will see that this will be increasing. And I get many times these questions actually, what will happen when war will be finished, and hopefully war will be finished very soon, and we'll see again Ukraine united as a big country. And what will happen is, I think that when infrastructure is there and we will work together with railroads, when we will have a good tariffs and when we will have the united tariff, I think most of these goods that are coming right now, it will stay in the Middle Corridor. And definitely, there is so much production now in Central Asia that, and still Middle Corridor is the fastest one. To compare to the, let's say, on a northern route, which goes to Sluga port, it's 3,000 kilometers, and when the same product comes to us to on a Black Sea 2,000 kilometers. So it's like quite big difference. And I'm always telling to, like, you know, when I get these questions, that like, we don't need to forget that Russia itself is a big producer. And they need their railroad and their ports for their production. And again, for Central Asia, especially for Turkmenistan, for Uzbekistan, and even for Kazakhstan, the middle corridor is the best way. So we need to work together to invest more into infrastructure. And I would say actually that it's very important to bring more Western investors to this infrastructure. My company, we are the biggest direct American investors into Batumi port, into Ajara region. And we are ready to invest even more into Black Sea port developments and into like infrastructural developments. Thank you very much, and I'm ready for additional questions, if there will be any, and we can discuss this.
Thank you, sir, very much. We're now turning to Yerzhan Nauruzbayev, who is Deputy CEO of a joint venture between Kazakhstan Railways and PSA International. How's it going?
Thank you, sir. It's great to be a part of such an esteemed panel with such distinguished speakers and the moderator, of course. Sir, I cannot help but notice that I'm actually bringing the average age of our panel a bit down, right? I mean, despite this young age, I hope I can add value to our discussion today. Before I get to your question, sir, if the audience doesn't mind, I'm going to throw some figures at you, some numbers at you. So KPMC stands for KTZ PSA Middle Corridor. This joint venture was created by Kazakhstan Railways and PSA International. Let me give you just a brief overview of our two shareholders. KTZ, Kazakhstan Temir Joli, Kazakhstan Railways, is one of the largest railway companies in the world. If you look at our mainline rail track length, we're talking about 16,000 kilometers. If we add all the stations, we're talking about 23,000 kilometers of rail track. This makes us one of the biggest in the world, certainly. KTZ is the largest employer in Kazakhstan. We have 113,000 staff throughout the country. And under the leadership of the current CEO, Mr. Nurlan Sauranbayev, in the last 3 years, we actually reached the annual revenue of 2 trillion tenge per annum. That amounts to $4.5 billion US. And the net income for last year, we actually achieved at 134 billion tenge. PSA International, and I know our good friend Eugene actually is an ex-PSA employee. PSA International is the world's largest container port operator. It's present in 44 countries. I think it's 66 terminals, 55,000 employees, annual turnover of 8 billion Singapore dollars, and net income of 1.5 billion Singapore dollars. So this joint venture, this is a child of two very mighty parents, one in Kazakhstan and one in Singapore. Now, to get to your question, Dr. Starr, are the infrastructure projects real, or are they just blah, blah, blah? I want to talk about 5 very real projects in rail infrastructure in Kazakhstan. So the first one, which we actually accomplished last year, is a dry port terminal in Xi'an, China. So as we know, Middle Corridor starts in coastal China, in cities like Qingdao, Lianyungan, Dalian, then it goes, everything goes to Xi'an. Xi'an is in central China, it's a big logistics hub, and also happens to be the birthplace of Chairman Seah, right? And from Xi'an, about 40% of all rail traffic that goes from China to Europe originates in Xi'an. So KTZ, the National Railroad Company of Kazakhstan, now has a strategic footprint in that logistics node in Xi'an. That's the first project. Second project that is currently underway and is scheduled to be finished by the end of 2027 is the expansion of the Dostok-Muinty rail track. So we're building 400 kilometers of new rail track, second track, which is going to double the capacity of the 2 border crossing points in Khorgos and Dostok. The third project, which will be completed by the end of 2025, is the Almaty bypass. Currently, the transit volume that comes from China has to go through Almaty and then along the Middle Corridor to the port of Aktau, port of Baku, and then Georgia. When containers go to the city of Almaty, we actually lose 2 to 4 days, just because Almaty is so congested. With the bypass, the transit containers on rail won't have to go to the city of Almaty, but actually instead bypass the city and go straight along the middle corridor, or for example, China Central Asia corridor. That's the third project. The fourth project is actually connecting Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. It's called Darbaza-Makhtaral, which is also underway and will be completed on time. And the fifth, and probably one of the most important projects, is the third border crossing point with China, rail border crossing point, Bakhty-Chuguchak. That whole project will be constructed to satisfy the increasing demand of freight flow from China to Russia and from Russia to China. Given the geopolitical situation right now, we see that the Chinese rail exports going through Kazakhstan to Russia last year increased 8-fold. Just think about it, 800%. When we talk about Russia export going through Kazakhstan to China, rail export increased 6 times, so 600%. So this third border crossing point may actually not be enough. So last week, the first Deputy Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, Roman Sklar, he already announced that Kazakhstan government is thinking about building the fourth rail border crossing point with Russia to satisfy this increased demand. So these 5 projects, the dry terminal in Seah, Almaty bypass, Bakhty border crossing point, Dostok-Moynty expansion, and also Darbaza-Makhtaral, these 5 railway infrastructure projects are very real. Not only they exist in very fancy PowerPoint presentations, but actual work is being done today. They are all going according to the schedule. And once they are complete, Kazakhstan will increase its capacity to service the middle corridor, the northern corridor, Russia-China, Russia-Central Asia, China-Central Asia, and also China-Persian Gulf freight flows. Just on a side note, from 2010 to 2023, the container rail traffic going through Kazakhstan increased 100 times, which something that was not existent in 2010. Last year, we broke the record. My colleagues would attest to that. 1,289,000 TEUs that went through Kazakhstan. Again, something that 10, 15 years ago, sir, you probably would attest to that as well. Something that was unthinkable. It now is very, very real. Thanks to the infrastructure projects in Kazakhstan, in Azerbaijan, in Georgia, in Turkey, and in China itself.
Thank you very much. Astonishing. Astonishing. We now turn to Mikheil Nibladze, who is Managing Director of Cerberus Frontier. Sir.
Thank you very much it's a pleasure to be here with these distinguished panel members, with CAMCA alumni guests. I represent the financial institution group called Cerberus Capital Management, which is US-based financial institution, and I'll try to talk from financial perspective about today's topic. What are the opportunities? What are the obstacles? What needs to be done in order to basically, as you said, to make this middle corridor a viable and robust and sustainable route, because there has been a lot of talks. We usually like to talk a lot about big projects, billions, but at the end everything comes to mathematics, right? Everything comes to financial numbers, everything comes to returns, and I believe that that's something that we need to focus more going forward and find the way how financially these projects will work, right? Obviously, and the good example for that is northern route, which Mamuka mentioned, versus middle corridor or so-called Transpian corridor, right? Right now, this northern route is, because of various reasons, is cheaper than Transcaspian route. And we have to face it, right? Why this is cheaper and how the Transcaspian corridor can become financially competitive with the northern road, because otherwise investors will be demotivated to come and invest in this corridor, right? Investors like, reputable, sophisticated investors who I think we all want to see them here coming. And as you know, there is a number of policies, number of subsidies, even I can call, which the northern corridor right now is benefiting from vis-a-vis this middle corridor. And I think this is one very important point that we need to think when we are thinking how to make sustainable, robust middle corridor, how we can work on it, right? And I guess the solution is, good news is that we have a solution, right? The solution is the fact that we have the cargo, right? We have the volumes that needs to be transported from Central Asia to European Union or farther in the world or Northern Africa. So, the reason why basically this northern corridor has been sort of more competitive up until now, I believe, is also the fact that there was no infrastructure in middle corridor. So, like it's chicken and egg situation, right? You don't have infrastructure, cargo is not coming. If you have, infrastructure on the other side, there is no cargo. I would like to sort of mention this was one of the obstacles for one of the big projects in Georgia, in deep sea, on the Black Sea, which failed a few years ago because of, not being able to have the cargo. Now it's a different situation. We have the cargo, we have the willingness from Central Asian countries to diversify their transportation routes, and there is no infrastructure. There is no robust and sustainable infrastructure, and I think that's a very right time and very sort of exact moment for all the countries which, as Matt mentioned, needs to be aligned as much as possible to work with the private investors or work with the investors around the world who will be capable of building this infrastructure together with local partners and make this infrastructure and invite this cargo into this corridor, hence making this corridor sustainable, efficient, and more financially attractive than Northern Corridor. I think this is very, very much the moment right now, and we need to very carefully think, work, align ourselves. We have a very good example. We have, it's been mentioned by Matt again, the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan, right? There is a transportation route. This is a proven route which has been efficient. There are talks about, electricity being transported through this corridor as well. So why not to transfer, to create the infrastructure and overcome this multimodality in an efficient way, because again, it's the shortest and most natural route for goods to go to European Union and backwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would either of you like to present any visual material on the screen?
Maybe we'll wait for a question section.
Okay. Yeah. Eugene, would you like
No
to?
questions.
We have talked about the competition between the northern corridor and the middle corridor, and we've heard various statements on this subject. I would like to ask, maybe starting with you, how are you analyzing this? I mean, in the end of the day, this is the big issue. Either you win or you lose on that one. A second question, which I would like to ask, but I'm not going to do so at the moment, is, okay, this is all understandable in terms of China to Europe, Europe to China, but what about exporting goods from the region itself? But let's hold that one for now. Let's focus on, is this corridor that you guys have spent so much serious work on really competitive? And what do you know about it? Eugene.
To answer that question, you have to look at, okay, we start from the Northern Corridor. Why do we need the Northern Corridor? It all started from investments. Western companies started investing in the western parts of China, in Shenyang, Chongqing. Automobile companies, Foxtron was there, computers was being built, printers, whole electronics industry, Volkswagen was there. And so they had to bring the components from Germany, Duisburg, using the Northern Corridor. And they bring the finished products back using the Northern Corridor. And they did it very fast. They did it in less 15, 16 days. And that built up the whole infrastructure network there, through Kazakhstan. And earlier on in my speech, I mentioned that why was it this possible? Because these countries were in the Eurasian Economic Union. It was a union where they had to harmonize everything together, and it was possible in the framework. So, remember what I said, in the middle corridor, things were very sensitive. If you don't have the war, if the Turkish didn't shot down Russian jet, people would just not do the middle corridor. It would just be there. For 25 years, the throughput was not more in terms of TU, was not more than 5,000 TUs. Only now then people realize that this is like a must-do for the alternative. But going back to your question, Frederick, what's the purpose? If you look at some of the reports in EBRD, they say if you de-bottleneck everything, is it possible? You can handle over 1 million TUs. Yes, Kazakhstan is handling over 1 million TUs within the country using the various networks. But that's not true in the middle corridor. If you de-bottleneck, this is the real point. If you de-bottleneck in certain areas that will promote economic activity, and using the middle corridor as an outlet for Central Asian countries, you can handle possibly between 500,000 to 800,000 TUs. Take Kyrgyzstan, for example. You have industrial production centers in Chi, Isuku, and Jalabad. But is this connected to the middle corridor? It's a possibility. You can connect this using modernization of rail tracks, Osh to Artijan, and then even from these centers to Almaty. And from there, you can use the middle corridor to transport your goods out. This is not sensitivity to external geopolitical forces. This is central to the sustainability of the middle corridor. In one of the reports by EBRD, they talk about CTCN, Central Transcaspian Network. If you look in this area, they have carved out between 300 to 600 kilometers, Shymkent, Tashkent, Almaty, Bishkek. They are all in this central CTCN. If the network can be produced to include these production centers, feed the middle corridor, and find an outlet out, using Azerbaijan as a transit point, because your northern and southern, there are issues, you can work out to a sustainable volume of cargo to make use of this molecular corridor to connect with the world markets. And this also includes what my friend here was talking about for the fertilizer.
Good. Excellent.
Thank you
Yes,
very
please.
much. If I'm, sorry.
You want to go first? Yeah, please.
Can I ask your team maybe to put the map of, like I think it will be easier as well. Yes, they can use your map or map for my presentation. So to answer on this, actually, like to compare the middle corridor to the northern corridor.
The map?
Let's say products that are produced in Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. I can tell you that it's not even comparable because for Turkmen and Uzbek goods, middle corridor is way cheaper, faster, and safer as well because it gets to the end users way faster than going through the northern corridor. In regard of Kazakhstan, it's a different story. But I can give you an example. Let's say like sulfur that is coming from Kazakhstan that is produced by Chevron. Part of it comes to us in Batumi and part of it goes to Ust-Luga in Russia. It takes about 15 days for a wagon that comes to Batumi to get back to the producer in Kazakhstan when it comes to Batumi. It takes about 45 days when they send the same wagon to Ust-Luga in Russia. So it's a huge difference in a days. So and when you are producing and you are a producer and you are focused on an export, then time is very important for you. We are working right now very closely with our partners in Azerbaijan and with Georgian Railroad as well to make this even faster as well and to put more ferries into the Caspian Sea, that it will help us to bring even more products quicker toward Dalia to Azerbaijan and then to bring it through South Caucasus to Black Sea as well. Again, our main challenge right now in middle corridor is the lack of infrastructure. Again, I won't go somewhere far. I will just speak about examples that what I can say as a company. I'm handling right now about 1.5 million tons. But my demand is about like today, it's about 2.5 to 3 million tons. Basically 1.5 million tons every year, I need to say no to this product. That because it's a very simple reason, I don't have a facility in Batumi or in Poti or, I don't want to speak about Anaklia right now. But we are working on this to invest into the facilities. In the next couple of years, hopefully we will have this facility and then definitely we will increase this. But again, to compare northern route and middle corridor, it's like, again, for Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, it's shorter, cheaper, safer, and for Kazakhstan as well, like time-wise, and it's like, takes 15 days for a wagon to go back to the producer in Kazakhstan, not just to reach us in Batumi. So it's but again, we need to work more and we need to make more investments into the infrastructure.
Thank you very much. I see a very skeptical look in the eye of Mikheil and a very eager look in the eye. Mikheil, first.
Well, I guess that. Hello. Yes. I think what needs to be basically said in terms of whatever has just been mentioned, right? The financial sort of aspects, right? And obviously, this wagon turnaround and this territorial shortages, right? It's not shortage, but it's being a short sort of lengths to cover. That makes a lot of sense and that is exactly why I'm saying that this corridor has a potential. The question here is, right, how you basically sort of get to whatever Eugene said, right? At least to my mind, how you create this network in Central Asia around these 4 major cities, efficient network, how to make these goods, whatever are required or whatever are produced in that region, to get to the sort of to Baku port And I believe after that, it's pretty much straightforward because the cooperation, I mean, I've heard a lot of rumors as well that, Azerbaijan sort of railway is a bottleneck, or Georgian railway sometimes is a bottleneck. There is not enough, infrastructure investments again into the wagons, into the cars that needs to basically move fast in order to receive these goods and to try, but once you secure this railway, these wagons which are available in this, after that it's much faster. So again, what we come to the requirement of infrastructure investments, requirement into the rolling stock investments, right? And this all has to make financial sense, right?
Yes, we hope. Yerzhan, and then Matt.
Sure. I think fundamentally, when we talk about a logistics product, it has three components. It's speed, service level, and price, right? I think you'd agree with me. The whole discussion, kind of comparing the northern route to the middle corridor, I think it stems from the situation that happened in 2022. I think Eugene would attest to that as well. February of 2022, we all know what happened. And all of a sudden, 300,000 TEUs of this volume that would go via Russia decided to go via the middle corridor. And unfortunately, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, again, I'm not pointing fingers, right? We're not pointing fingers at each other, but we all had our operational issues, and we could not handle that volume. 2022, transit time would be close to 60 days, right? Port of Baku, Port of Aktau, Batumi, Poti, Kazakh Railroad, Azerbaijani Railroad, Georgian Railroad, we were not ready. Now it's 2024. Something that's very real today, and Eugene can also correct me if I'm wrong. Right now, a container train leaving from Seah in central China, going to Absheron Peninsula to Baku takes 12 days. This is very real. Of course, the price is a bit higher, but this service comes at a premium. And there are certain shippers, certain beneficial cargo owners in China who are willing to pay that premium for the product that they want to deliver along the middle corridor. I'll give you a very, very good example. One of the biggest producers of tomato paste in the world is Xinjiang, Urumqi. Now that tomato paste needs to go to Italy. And then if you can provide the 12 days to Baku, and then from Baku to Georgia, and then along the Mediterranean, Black Sea, you can get to Italy, people are willing to pay that premium. But because of the situation in 2022, we need to rebuild trust in the middle corridor. That, some of the shippers did not have a very good experience in 2022. But I think we're working very, very hard to remedy the situation and bring the volume and increase the volume along the middle corridor. Because as Eugene rightfully mentioned, the capacity, the potential for capacity is up to 800,000 TEUs per year. This is something we can achieve if we debottleneck, both from operational efficiency standpoint and also from investing in critical infrastructure along the middle corridor. And last point I'd like to make, it's very interesting how Eugene, obviously a Singaporean, was saying freight goes through us, through Azerbaijan, just shows how global we are. But I think in the middle corridor, Kazakhstan has probably one of the bigger roles, because Altınkol to Aktau, it's almost 3,000 kilometers. That's what we call the Trans-Kazakh Railroad. Of course, then Caspian, Azerbaijan, and Georgia have very important nodes, but unless all the members along the middle corridor coordinate their efforts and play together, we won't be able to maintain this very fantastic result that we are able to achieve today, 12 days from Seah to Baku.
Thank you very much.
So to try to synthesize some of these powerful points, one, you see how important competition is, right? As you were just talking about, Yerzhan, even between Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan in a political sense on the same middle corridor. Your question, Fred, was about the competition. Isn't it geopolitically bad that the northern corridor is maybe cheaper than the middle corridor? But I think the way the people who provide the investment and operate the systems think is that you have enough infrastructure in place to meet the demand. And so we've seen demand shoot up along the middle corridor for the reasons discussed. Yes, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, but also COVID, right? During COVID, supply chains, as we know, got all messed up. Container shipping rates were insanely high. By the way, TEU, that means container, 10-foot equivalent unit, 10-foot container. So there were not enough containers in the right places. And my understanding is there was a period where even to move from Aktau to Batumi, it took 60, sometimes even 90 days for something that should take, what, 12 days? So, and time is money, as you were just saying, Yerzhan. So what you're hearing now is that the investors and operators are saying, we're on top of this need for more capacity. We didn't expect the black swan events. They happened. Now we're putting in place that infrastructure. And my last point is the importance of the coordination. Yes, the US government played a massive coordinating role on those pipeline projects I talked about. But we knew that the resources, the demand was there for the transit. It was clear that this oil and gas was going to come out of the ground. Now it's clear that these volumes of cargoes and containers, there's demand for that transport. But there is, going back to competition, a bit of competition between the Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan route and the middle corridor. For one simple reason is, as you said, Mamuka, not enough ferries, not enough ships in the Caspian Sea. So it would be really good for everybody involved if there was some sort of organization or body that could help coordinate the investments, not only in the hardcore infrastructure, but also digitization of all of the bills of lading, all the documentation that is at the core of logistics, and also having enough rail cars, et cetera. There's one more route, there's the north-south route. For the benefit of Dr. Moridian, I'm gonna make clear when I talk about Afghanistan, I do not think that it's good that we ignore all the human rights concerns of the Taliban, et cetera. But the reality, as we heard from Mr. Valiev from Uzbekistan yesterday, is that producers of commodities, especially ones that are important for global food security in Central Asia, they want optionality. Yeah, they want the middle corridor. Yes, Kazakhstan is expanding the northern corridor, but they also want a southern corridor which has begun in nascent form to be movement of low-value commodities like sulfur from Central Asia through Afghanistan to Pakistani ports.
Ladies and gentlemen, listening to these remarkably impressive statements, I'm sure you agree with me, I wouldn't want to be competing with this team. We didn't rehearse this ahead, but as you can see, they are almost singing in the same key, and this is very positive. However, Matt has just introduced a contrary theme, and I want to use our last few minutes to address it because it's extremely important. And it turns on two realities. Reality one is this fastest growing major economy in the world today is India. It's a fact, it's a reality, and it's not going to become less so. Look on the map. It doesn't figure at all. Are they to export nothing? Are they to consume everything at home? I like Indian food, but come on. No, obviously, India is already exporting. It's exporting to this region. I count the number of Indian restaurants in Central Asia today versus 10 years ago. No, it's happening, and they're exporting to the world. There's no way on earth that the Caucasus and Central Asia can get products from India in any efficient manner, or that they can get products to India in any, or the rest of Southeast Asia. So this is now that's reality one. Reality two is they are landlocked. It's fine to have opened up a corridor to a window to the east. It's fine to have opened up a window to the west. But until they have a southern window, they're still partially landlocked. Now, it's very interesting. There is a Georgian scholar named Murjikneli, late Murjikneli, who lived in Uzbekistan, a close friend. He wrote a remarkable book called The Great India Road. It was published in English as well as in Uzbek and in Russian. in which he made the obvious point that over 3,000 years, the major route in this region of the world was not to China. We call the Silk Road, but actually the bigger route was south to India and Southeast Asia. It's a very important point, and we've distorted our image because of the total focus on China-Europe. Who are the victims of that focus? Central Asians who are awaiting a window to the south. Now, our subject is mega projects. Are any of them actually going to happen? And we've been hearing from really competent people here who are able to judge that. Okay, very quickly. You have, as Matt said, certain things, low-value products are going across Afghanistan today to Pakistan and India. That's happening. But meanwhile, you have the lapis lazuli corridor that goes from Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan to Pakistan and beyond, India. That's under serious discussion. Then you have the TAPI pipeline from Turkmenistan. Again, it's not in abeyance. And you have energy export from Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan through the CASA 1000. And that discussions are quietly going forward again on that. And then, above all, you have the railroad, which there's now a written agreement between Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan to go from Termez to Peshawar. Now, those last that I listed, a whole series of mega projects, let me conclude this session by asking each of you, grading the possibility of these 1 to 5. 1 is very possible, 5 is forget it. Where do you come out on, in speaking generally, the window to the south? Matt, you brought it up.
Well, 5 on the low value, because it's happening. And the U.S. government, Office of Foreign Assets Control, so Department of the Treasury, the sanctions enforcers, I've discussed this with them, with the very head of it all, and they don't object at this time. So but then there's the whole problem, the moral problem and geostrategic problem of how much you want to empower the Taliban regime, while at the same time, the country has to develop. So I think that is going to happen. We've been following TAPI for a few decades. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think that lapis lazuli is way too complex in terms of the number of countries that have to align, and when you have to get investors like these guys to provide the money for each component. I hope it happens. There's one more you didn't mention. It's the India-Middle East corridor that the G20, I guess, is talking about. That goes from India. That's the I part. But how you get it goes into Israel and then in the Mediterranean, and that's going to be on hold for a while.
Are any of these going to happen?
It's a question of timing. If Afghanistan continues to be stable, because currently there are already inflows of companies using the route from Uzbekistan, Afghanistan to Pakistan to ship sulfur, other chemicals out. And recently I attended a meeting, seminar, and there were also investments in diesel production using oil exported even from Iran up to Afghanistan. So there are economic activities going out. In a limited sense, they need this kind of railroad improvements if they are to be improved.
I'm going to have to interrupt all of you. Our time is running out, so
Yep.
I'm going to ask you to be very concise.
I will not be very optimistic on this, all right? I will give it like a middle answer to this, right?
Good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting questions. I believe that yes, at one point probably it will happen, and we will see. I don't know if it will be in my lifetime or not, but we will see probably routes coming from Central Asia to India.
Yeah.
But we need to take in consideration 2 very important things. One is geography and geology. How are you going to build this? Because you need infrastructures there. You cannot just take many things on a trucks and deliver them to India. You need hard infrastructure like railroads, other things there as well, which is a quite big investment. And is there enough goods in Central Asia that that needs to go that way? So hopefully, like, next, I don't know, several years we'll see this, but right now I don't see it as happening in next 10 years.
Thank you. Yerzhan.
I'll be very brief. I actually have high hopes for the classic north-south route, which is actually Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Iran, and then to India. I think that one has a lot of potential, and we see a lot of volume growth along that route. Now, when you talk about the Trans-Afghan, I think I won't be as hopeful, although if it actually happens, that would bring a lot of new economic activity to the region for sure.
Thank you.
Well,
He's been censored.
Yes.
no, thank you.
Well,
He said it's a matter of time.
a matter of time.
Yeah, thank you, and yeah, I agree with the colleagues. It's something that has to. It's a complicated issue. It's even more complicated than middle corridor, I believe, and due to many factors mentioned. So, but hopefully the recent developments will give us some moderate hope that this is going to happen sometime in the near medium to long term. Yeah, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard an astonishing series of reports, very impressive, competent people. And in the end, we're up in the air on the final question, the southern window. If I may offer my own opinion, I think the chances are 4. Very positive. I think much more is happening right now than we are aware of. It's interesting that there's nothing on this in a focused way at this conference. Maybe there should have been. But there's not just one railroad to the south, which avoids Afghanistan entirely, which may be a negative because it doesn't connect to Central Asia either. It goes around through Azerbaijan. There is also the Chinese route coming down, which avoids Central Asia by skirting through Pakistan. Now, there are projects actively underway both to connect through the heart of Central Asia, both to the eastern and western route, and those in turn lead to 2 competing ports on the Arabian Sea. You have Gwadar in Pakistan, and you have Chabahar, Cold Spring, in Iran. Let them compete. Let them compete, and let the Central Asians generate this competition by deciding, once they have their railroad, which will happen into Afghanistan, that will connect both east and west, both to each of those peripheral routes, and be the most efficient route to the south. Let them compete, and I think everyone will benefit from this, and indeed it might be a very positive factor in moderating life in Afghanistan itself. I want to thank our team here, and I want to assure you we didn't meet ahead. It may sound like we're all singing in the same key, but this is just the voice of expertise, and thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Frederick.
We want to thank our panel. I have a few quick announcements. We will be breaking in just a moment, and then we'll be resuming for our next 2 parallel sessions. There will be a session in here on education and a session on the 2nd floor in the same room that we've been in on media. Before that, we'd like to invite everyone up to the stage for a group photo. If you're interested in participating, we'll be doing that right now. Thank you.